Tokyo Mirage Sessions #FE
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Tome of Silver, the show where I randomly select a game from my collection, review it, and add it to an ever-growing ranking list. In January of 2013, Nintendo made the announcement that one of its major IPs, Fire Emblem, a medieval strategy RPG series, would be crossing over with Atlus's morality-focused tactical RPG series, Shin Tensei. This announcement got quite a lot of people excited, and for good reason. I mean, the crossover of these two popular RPG series was a huge surprise, and the possibility of how these two IPs could merge got a lot of people curious. A commonly asked question was whether the game would take place in a more medieval-focused setting a la Fire Emblem, or if the game would take place in modern-day Tokyo, much like Shin Tensei. Well, in April of 2015, the world finally got its answer, as gamers would get their first look at the crossover game, and people were shocked to say the least. The trailer showed off that the game did indeed take place in modern-day Tokyo, but what was shown off resembled neither Fire Emblem nor Shin Tensei. Instead of swords or demons, the game appeared to have a much greater focus on music and idols, and seemed to be much more colorful than fans were expecting, much to the disappointment of many. As the game continued to be shown off, it became clear that the game, now officially called Tokyo Mirage Sessions #FE, would be more of its own thing, using elements from the two series as a base, with a much greater emphasis on Japanese performing arts, rather than being a more traditional crossover. The game released in Japan in December of 2015, and here in the West in June of 2016. Tokyo Mirage Sessions was met with poor sales, despite positive reviews by critics. Whether these sales were because of the nature of the crossover, or if people just didn't think the game looked fun, I couldn't say. However, did the game really deserve to be forgotten and left in the dust like that, or is there something more to this unique crossover experience? The stage is set. Get into your best outfit, bring forth your Mirage, and let's take a look at Tokyo Mirage Sessions #FE for Wii U and Nintendo Switch. Tokyo Mirage Sessions #FE is a turn-based RPG originally released for the Wii U, later being released for the Switch as Tokyo Mirage Sessions #FE Encore. This version of the game added some exclusive costumes, a bonus dungeon, and included all the DLC from the Wii U version, at least the Western Wii U version. More on that later. As such, I will be using this version of the game, as it's the same as the Wii U version otherwise, but with additional features. In Tokyo Mirage Sessions, or TMS as I will be referring to it going forward, you play as Itsuki Aoi, the single most bland piece of cardboard, a typical everyman student, who is wandering around Tokyo when he notices his friend Tsubasa entering an idol competition. Tsubasa is a bubbly, ditzy girl with dreams of becoming a famous idol, just like her sister, who vanished in a mass disappearance at a theater 5 years prior. During the competition, these strange wraiths called mirages attack, leaving people drained of all their energy, and Tsubasa being dragged through a portal to some unknown realm. Itsuki runs after her, and is transported to a strange, twisted version of Tokyo where he is attacked by more mirages. In a moment of desperation, a ball of light emerges from Itsuki's chest. Grabbing this ball of light, Itsuki strikes two mirages. Itsuki's attack manages to return these two wraiths to their senses, and it's revealed that these mirages are actually Fire Emblem characters, that being Chrom from Fire Emblem Awakening and Seda from Fire Emblem 1. The Fire Emblem characters have all undergone drastic redesigns to make them better resemble Shin Tensei demons, and I think they're all great, especially Chrom, who looks really damn cool. Certainly a much darker design than how he appears in his home series. Chrom and Seda then turn into weapons and grant Itsuki and Tsubasa powerful new forms called Carnage forms, which allow them to fight back against the mirages. After their first fight, Chrom and Seda explain that they have lost their memories and have no idea why they're trying to attack the protagonist, but both are willing to aid Itsuki and Tsubasa and help them escape. Eventually the quartet meet up with Toma, Itsuki's best friend, who also has a mirage in the form of Cain from Fire Emblem 1. After a pretty simple boss fight, the trio manage to recover the people's stolen energy and escape the strange location. Upon leaving, Itsuki and crew meet Maiko, the president of an entertainment company called Fortuna, which, while acting as an entertainment company on the outside, secretly works behind the scenes to put a stop to evil mirages. Maiko explains that Tokyo is being attacked by mirages, who want to steal the citizens' performa. Performer is essentially someone's talent, for lack of a better term. The power to sing, act, etc. And the reason why they want to steal Performer is currently unknown. However, those with especially powerful Performer are capable of becoming Mirage Masters, individuals with the power to join forces with a heroic Mirage and fight back against evil ones. These heroic Mirages take the form of various characters from either the first Fire Emblem or Fire Emblem Awakening. Itsuki and Tsubasa join Fortuna to put a stop to the Mirages attacking Tokyo, and to become popular figures in the entertainment industry. Meanwhile, Chrom and the other characters from Fire Emblem aid Fortuna with their fight against the Mirages, to protect the people, recover their memories, and find a way back home. So yeah, as you could probably tell from my brief synopsis, TMS's story is utterly ridiculous. This is a world where the bad guys want to take over the Japanese entertainment industry, and if you're a popular enough idol or actor, you have the power to defeat and dethrone God with a cool warrior as your partner. For what it's worth, I kinda enjoyed TMS's story. It's really nothing amazing by any stretch of the imagination, but I'll admit that the wacky premise of random Japanese teens teaming up with various Fire Emblem characters to put a stop to an evil force while becoming idols is as charming as it is absurd. And if you can accept how silly the premise of the game is, then you're in for a decently fun ride. Your mileage may vary with the characters of TMS, however. The characters in this game, specifically the non-Fire Emblem characters, are definitely an acquired taste. The main character, Itsuki, is incredibly boring and lacks any motivation that isn't given to him by the characters around him. The rest of the supporting cast are very trope heavy, and to be honest, no one here acts like a normal human being. Usually with JRPGs, characters start off very tropey, but over the course of the story and through side missions, they get fleshed out and humanized more. There are side missions in this game, but in most cases, they make the characters even weirder than they already are. Tsubasa learns how to act by tracking down and staring at a cat, while Yashiro, the group's resident cool guy, reveals he doesn't understand the importance of eating food, at the age of 19. To be fair, some of these missions actually do flesh out the characters a bit. I quite like Toma's side story, where he learns what it means to be a hero, and how well it ties in with his area of the performing arts, that being Sentai shows in the vein of Power Rangers or Kamen Rider. The point I'm trying to make is that if you're looking for a story with very human and realistic feeling characters, you won't find it with TMS. If you don't mind the characters being closer to archetypes, what's here is enjoyable. There's certainly fun to be had seeing these dynamic and over-the-top personalities bounce off of each other. Just know that the plot and characters within it are not particularly deep. Honestly, the only character I don't like of the main cast was Tsubasa, and I feel your enjoyment of Tsubasa will greatly affect your overall enjoyment of TMS's narrative as a whole. Tsubasa feels very much like the actual main character of TMS over Itsuki, and most of the story revolves around her. A little too much, honestly. Almost every chapter deals with Tsubasa learning a new part of being an idol, with the rest of the cast playing a continuous supporting role to her. Even characters that are introduced in the current chapter feel like they take a major backseat compared to Tsubasa, and it can lead to some characters like Eleonora feeling like an afterthought. They also do this thing with Tsubasa where they really want her to be likable, so they stack her up with a ludicrous amount of quirks to make her more charming. However, for me personally, if I feel like the story is trying way too hard to make me like a character and force them down my throat, it usually makes me like them a lot less, which unfortunately was the case here. Characters other than Tsubasa and Itsuki only get their moment to shine in the side stories rather than in the main plot, which makes them feel much less important in the grand scheme of things. For the most part, Tokyo Mirage Sessions feels like Tsubasa and friends, rather than a proper team of equals. As for the Fire Emblem characters, they play much more of a supporting role. Usually they have a few words of encouragement for their respective Mirage Master, and occasionally have something to say about the plot at hand, but for the most part, the idols are the focus of the story, and the inclusion of these Fire Emblem characters don't add a whole lot to the story, acting more as an additional spice rather than a main course. So if you're buying this game specifically for characters like Chrom or Tharja, temper your expectations on how much they will actually be featured. I was disappointed that the characters were only taken from either the original Fire Emblem or Fire Emblem Awakening. I understand that Awakening is incredibly popular, and the original is, well, the original, But Fire Emblem has such a diverse range of characters that could have been used, and I would have liked to have had a bit more variety of game representation, especially since the original reveal trailer for TMS showed characters from other games. That's not to mention that no characters from the Shin Megami Tensei series are featured at all, which can leave that side of the crossover's fans feel left out. In summation, the story and characters of TMS are fun, but ridiculous. You're not going to find a particularly compelling narrative with TMS, but if you can get behind the wackiness of the whole thing, then it's a worthwhile experience. Overall, I liked the story, but I was far from loving it. Now, let's get into the gameplay of Tokyo Mirage Sessions. Honestly, the gameplay is genuinely fantastic. The game's combat system is among some of my favorite combat in any RPG I have ever played. Each member of your party has a particular weapon and various elemental affinities. Each enemy you encounter has weaknesses and resistances to weapons and elements, which will do more or less damage to them accordingly. Pretty straightforward JRPG affair so far. Upon defeating enemies, you'll gain XP to level up both your characters, which will boost their stats, as well as their Mirage, which will earn skills. These skills can be various weapons and elemental attacks, spells that let you cast buffs and debuffs, and some skills which will let you get extra stat boosts and the like. Each Mirage can only have a certain amount of skills at a time, meaning you'll need to decide what skills you'll want to keep and what you'll want to discard. If a Mirage learns the same skill multiple times, you can power up that skill, which will make the attack deal more damage or cost less EP, this game's version of magic. After crafting your first weapon, you'll get access to each Mirage's special skill, which will let you call forth your Fire Emblem Mirage to deal devastating damage, or deal special effects to your party. Even with all that though, we haven't even gone to the real spice of the game's combat system, the Session skills. Session skills allow Itsuki and his allies to follow up an ally's attack with an attack of their own. For example, let's say Tsubasa gets the Session skill Electric Lunge. This means if Itsuki uses an electric attack on an opponent that is weak to electricity, Tsubasa will follow up with a spear attack, letting you deal 2 attacks on the enemy. Now let's say Toma then learns the skill Lance Blaze. This means after Tsubasa uses a lance attack, even after following up an electric strike by Itsuki, Toma will attack with a fire strike, thus dealing 3 attacks at once. Striking an enemy's weakness and using the right skill to start a session chain is the key to winning fights in TMS, and as you progress later in the game, you'll be able to string together sessions with every character in your party, and it's a blast to execute. It feels really rewarding watching your entire party wail on a foe and deal massive amounts of damage. That being said, once you get the full party in on sessions, the sessions can start to feel a little long and repetitive, due to needing to watch the animation for each and every party member's attack. In the Wii U version, you had no choice but to sit through each session chain as they performed their animation, which admittedly could make battles stretch on a bit too long, especially if you're grinding for experience. In the Encore re-release for the Switch, however, they thankfully add a speed up feature for sessions, which was a much needed addition and can let you speed through sessions if you just want to get a move on. As you gain skills and level up your Mirage, it won't take long for you to max out your Mirage's weapon level. Once you do that, you'll need to craft a new weapon to continue getting skills for that Mirage. As you defeat enemies, they'll drop items, and performing sessions grant you these stars called Prestige. You can then go to the Bloom Palace and bring the items to Tiki, who can use the items to create additional weapons, which will have a higher attack and allow each character to learn stronger skills. You can also use the prestige you get to learn new personal skills for each character, which can allow them to join in on a session even if they aren't currently on the field, allow them to survive a fatal blow, give them a 20% boost to their EP, etc. For the most part, this is an excellent mechanic that works very well. The only problem is that you have to go back to the Bloom Palace to get these weapons and bonuses. You can't do them while in a dungeon. And you are continuously meeting the requirements for these weapons and skills, meaning you are constantly needing to leave the dungeon to walk back to the Bloom Palace, make the weapons, make it back to where you were to the dungeon, only to fight 3 more enemies and have another skill or weapon you can make. Yes, you could just ignore them for a while and wait for a moment to do multiple at once, but that means you won't be getting new skills if your weapon is maxed out, or you could be lacking a skill that can make your trip through the dungeon much easier. Not constantly going to the Bloom Palace means depriving yourself of vital abilities. so I felt almost obligated to continue this back and forth of leaving and coming back to a dungeon, and it got tedious. I wish they just allowed you to do this crafting mechanic anywhere, instead of restricting it to a particular location. Those complaints aside, between the weapons, personal skills, mirage skills, and chaining together sessions, this combat has a lot of meat on its bones, and as you progress further into the game, you'll also get master seals which you can use to change the class of your mirages, allowing you to make more weapons, give you stat boosts, and more special attacks for your mirage. And then, yes there's more, you have the side missions. Aside from giving you additional scenes with each character by completing the various side stories, you'll unlock even more combat options. Completing non-party member side stories will give you some bonuses like items costing less in the store, making it easier to run from battles, things like that. But your party members will gain access to special moves called ad-lib performances. These performances are triggered randomly before an attack, but using them will deal powerful attacks with special properties and immediately trigger a session, regardless of if the enemy was weak to the attack or not. And then, you'll later get duo arts, which can appear randomly during a session. These duo arts have even more unique properties, such as dealing huge damage or healing your entire party. These arts can be triggered by hitting the L or R button when the duo arts icon appears before the end of a session. If you select one, then after the session the duo art will start, and once it's finished it will trigger another full session. Which means if you just had your full party perform a session and you get a duo art, your full party will then come back to deal another full session on the enemy. It gets absolutely nuts. Truly, TMS's combat system really is something unique and special. You are constantly earning new ways to fight and continuously feeling like you are getting stronger. It's truly impressive just how much there is, and even by the end of the 40 or so hours it took for me to beat the game, I never got tired of the combat system because there was always something new and fresh being introduced which stopped it from getting stale. I just spent a long time explaining all the various mechanics of TMS, and if that all sounded overwhelming, it surprisingly isn't. Yes, there is a lot to this combat system that we put the player's way, but they're presented one at a time instead of all at once, so you'll have enough time to grasp one mechanic before needing to learn the next. It's a very natural learning process, and you're unlikely to feel too much is being thrown at you despite how much there is. Even with all these abilities, the game never felt too easy either. The bosses each have unique gimmicks to them which make them very challenging, and they can easily wipe you out if you're not sufficiently prepared. The boss fights really were some of my favorite parts of TMS, as they put how well you've upgraded your characters and how well you chose your skills to the test, and even with all my abilities, I never felt like I defeated a boss without much difficulty. I had such a great time. Now that I've finally covered everything the gameplay has to offer, let's get into the game's presentation, and just like with the combat, it's top notch. TMS uses tons of bright and vibrant colors that lets everything pop, and it's very appealing. And the game has a lot of style in its individual menus. It feels like no corners were cut when it came to making this game as visually distinct as possible. Something I want to praise is how well the game takes its idle theme and runs with it. When you enter combat, the battles take place on a giant open stage, with a large crowd waving glow sticks cheering the players on, and teleprompters float behind the party members to display their status. When performing an attack, a display appears with the name of the attack and the user being referred to as the artist performing. Even when casting a spell, each character casts the spell by signing their autograph in the air. Now, with how hard TMS goes with its idle theme, that means those who maybe wanted to play the game while ignoring the idle elements will find it quite a struggle to do so, since it's so ingrained into every aspect of the game. But personally, I think all these little touches are spectacular and enhances the game's sense of identity. And of course, what would performers be without some costumes? Yes, one of my favorite things a game can have, alternate costumes are here in full force, and each character gets such a wide selection of costumes based on the various performances throughout the story, that you can freely switch between whenever you want. I always love trying new costumes to add some visual spice during my time with the game. And if you're like me and you think Kiria's default Carnage form looks absolutely terrible, then you can change it out to something more your taste. Because if I'm gonna have to stare at a character for 40 or so hours, I definitely don't want them to look like that. The last bit of presentation I want to discuss is the game's music, and as you would hope with a game focused on idols, all the music here is stellar. All the overworld and battle themes are very good, and I especially enjoyed the boss themes. I, of course, would be remiss if I didn't talk about the game's vocal tracks. At many points in the game, TMS will have full-blown musical performances, animated in the Fire Emblem CG style, and wow, you could tell a lot of effort went into making these songs, and getting to see an animated music video along with it is a real treat. I actually regularly go back and re-listen to some of these songs every now and again, my favorites being Reincarnation and Black Rain. I don't think there was a single song here that was bad, and even the ones I may not have liked as much were still rather catchy. They really knocked it out of the park here with the music. Between its visual style and flashy combat, every aspect of Tokyo Mirage Session feels like a grand spectacle, and it really adds a lot to the overall experience. Something a bit unfortunate is that Tokyo Mirage Sessions does not have an English dub, being strictly Japanese with English subtitles. Normally this would annoy me, and I would chalk it up to the developers being too lazy to go through the dubbing process. However, because of the cast being idols, many of them need to be capable of not only voice acting the characters, but also singing during the various musical performances. As this is the case, I can understand a lack of English dubbing, as finding voice actors who can fit the characters while also being able to sing a full song, not to mention the effort that would need to go into translating the song in a way that would match the lip syncing, would be incredibly challenging. So in this case, I understand why this was done. That being said, I do still have a complaint. In combat, nothing is subtitled, whether it's the characters attacking, the bosses performing special attacks, or during the characters' victory animations, everything here lacks any kind of subtitling. It can become especially frustrating when I can hear the party members having unique conversations with the Mirages, or the party members having special conversations about a boss they are currently facing, and I can't understand any of it. It's all flavor text, and not hearing it won't stop you from understanding the story, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't have liked to know what was being said. Another complaint I have with the game is that the game overs will force you back to the title screen, without any chance to retry. This feels like an incredibly dated way of handling game overs, and it could get frustrating potentially losing an hour or so of progress because you forgot to save while navigating the dungeon. The game does allow the player to save anywhere at any time, so it's not that there's any difficulty of getting chances to save. Some setbacks from game overs were due to carelessness on my end. However, enemies can pop up anywhere around the player while they're navigating the dungeon, making it very easy to get blindsided. This is worse when you're blindsided by savage enemies that are of a much higher level than the other enemies in the area. Savage enemies, being a higher level, commonly go first in battle, and have the potential to one-shot your entire party. It's demoralizing to start a battle with an enemy you may not have seen coming, only for them to wipe out your party with no chance of fighting back. And if you hadn't saved in a while, that progress is gone without even a fighting chance. For as much as I love this game, there were certainly points where I had lost so much progress that I wanted to give up and put the game down instead of needing to make it back to where I was again. A retry feature, even if it meant needing to pay a certain amount of in-game money as punishment, would have been greatly preferred. The final part of TMS to discuss was some of the localization changes made throughout the game. I'll be honest, I debated even including this discussion, as I often am not bothered too much by localization changes, but in this case I feel there is some merit in bringing it up. Tokyo Mirage Sessions had multiple aspects heavily altered to remove various instances of sexualization. This included some characters' outfits getting alterations. If this was all, then I doubt this would have been too big of a deal. Look, I'm not someone who desperately needs characters, who are minors in the Japanese version mind you, to wear scantily clad outfits, and honestly, most of the time when the costumes were altered, I actually preferred the censored outfits to the original. However, the localization in TMS also changed the entire context of the second dungeon. The second dungeon originally dealt with the topic of gravure idols who take suggestive or provocative photos, and altering it to make it just about not being confident in a photo shoot. The changing of this context makes the dungeon make less sense, as there's no reason why Tsubasa is struggling for a normal photo shoot, thus making the narrative weaker for it. Some of these decisions just make no sense either. One of the first bosses, Aversa, had her chest censored in the Western release, having it be obscured in this out-of-place black fire. However, once you go into the actual boss fight, the fire isn't there. You can still see everything anyways. So why did they even bother? This is not to mention that there are some characters whose outfits are arguably worse in terms of being sexualized, yet remain untouched. Censoring in games to make things less sexual has never particularly bothered me. But when doing so makes the story worse or otherwise just doesn't make sense, then it shouldn't be altered. At that point, it's not a matter of taste. Players are just getting an inferior version of a product, and no one is happy with that. Despite my brief tirade near the end there, I hope it's clear that I think Tokyo Mirage Sessions is a great game. It has some issues which keeps it far from perfection. The save issue, distracting localization changes, and lack of subtitling during combat being chief among them. However, it's no small feat when I say that Tokyo Mirage Sessions might just have my favorite combat system in any RPG I have ever played, and the fact that I never grew bored with it over 40 hours speaks volumes. Add on the game's spectacular sense of style and simple yet wacky story, and you have yourself a truly one-of-a-kind JRPG. And so, after careful reflection, Tokyo Mirage Sessions seizes the number 5 spot from Alien Isolation. Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE may not have been the crossover anyone expected or even really wanted, but I'm honestly glad this game became what it was. I'm only sad that poor sales will ensure there will likely never be any attempts like it in the near future. But you know what, I'm still in a JRPG mood, so next time we'll be looking at a JRPG that was exclusive to the PlayStation Portable. I'm getting really bad at thinking up hints, so we'll just say that it wasn't a very popular game and leave the rest as a surprise. In the meanwhile, thank you so much for watching. Take care, and may we see each other again when we turn to the next chapter in the Tome of Silver.